Hello and welcome to Sidelines, an inside look at Cornell Athletics. I'm David Keating, and joining me today we have Andy Noel, the Meekum Smith Director of Athletics and Physical Education here at Cornell. Thanks for joining me, Andy.
Thanks a lot, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
So first off, just take me through what's a day in the life of Athletic Director here at Cornell?
That's a really difficult first question. I thought you'd throw me a softball. Instead, you threw me a slider. Wow, a basic day. I guess, getting my daughter off to school, which is really the fun part. Sometimes walking her into her first grade classroom and, getting to campus at about 7:45, 10:08. And pretty much blowing through the day with meetings and phone calls and that type of thing. And then hopefully around 4:35, when things slow down some, then actually try to do some proactive work that's generated by all those meetings and calls and what have you. And then try to get home by 7 each night. And then most often I like to take something home. Sometimes I don't even get to it, but quite often there are things to do. So the normal day is about almost 8 to a little past 7, and mainly meetings and calls and discussions with staff members and what have you. And it actually goes incredibly quickly each day. It really does. And it's in the main a lot of fun, actually.
You've been here at Cornell for quite some time. How has Cornell Athletics changed from when you first got here as a wrestling coach and then through to being athletic director till today?
Well, there's probably been enough nuance of change to fill a few hours, really. I mean, that's a tough question, a very broad question. But I guess if I had to distill it down, I believe right now we have among our staff, among our coaches, head and assistant coaches and staff members across the board, I really think we have a culture of winning where there's much more of an expectation to win and more of a sense that winning is not just possible but probable. And there is, I think, a positive sense that I feel among a lot of coaches. And something that strikes me that's apropos to your question is, hundreds and hundreds of alumni and our staff across the board here on campus disappointed because we expected to be in the semifinals and perhaps go farther. I mean, it's a little bit of I guess, a embodiment of that higher expectation. We're certainly proud to be in the top 8 in the country and to be second seeded and ranked number 2 in the nation at the end of the year. But it's a pretty positive thing when you're disappointed not to get to the Final Four. When you're disappointed in women's ice hockey not to get to the final game and only get to the Frozen Four because we really believed that we had a great shot of winning. Disappointed to be second in the NCAA in wrestling instead of first, losing to Penn State by 14 points. So it's that kind of situation, I think, David, that I don't think I felt when I was a young coach, although we did have excellent teams back then, particularly with Richie Moran's lacrosse team and Finley Meislin's rowing program and the hockey program and some others. But there just seems to be more of a sense of that now.
You mentioned some of the highlights of this past season. When you look back on this season in Cornell Athletics across the board with all the sports we offer and all the successes we had on and off the field here, what are the several things that really do come to mind?
Well, I was reflecting a little bit about that. 5 years ago, in 2005, 2006, we had 9 Ivy championships. This year we had 4. We had 5 second places, but we had 4 championships. It's the least amount of championships we've had in 9 years. But the bottom line is, what I want to emphasize is there's ferocious competition in the Ivy League for championships. The year that we won 9 championships and Princeton won 10, we were just on the heels of winning that sort of overall title, if you will. And Princeton and Harvard and Yale and some other schools have really emphasized aggressive financial aid, which we until this year had not been able to compete with. And thanks to David Skorton and Chairman Pete Meinig and a lot of work by Susan Murphy, the Vice President for Student and Academic Services, we now have a match program with the rest of the Ivy League, including, believe it or not, Duke and Stanford and MIT, And now we're competing on an even playing field in financial aid. So we did have sort of a slow decline from that pinnacle. In the previous 2 years, we had won 7 championships. So when we dropped to 4, that's our fair share with the other 7 schools in the league. But being a former coach and being a little bit aggressive and competitive, we want to win more than our fair share. So, hats off to our administrators who made that happen and to the alumni who support it. But we had a very strong year, but it wasn't a pinnacle year. And I think a lot of folks look at lacrosse success again, ranked 2nd in the country, wrestling being 2nd, women's ice hockey being back to the Frozen Four, and tennis emerging. First Ivy title since the official Ivy League was initiated in 1954, with round-robin play beginning in 1956. Our first title in the official Ivy League, although some of Dick Savitt's great teams, prior to that, were Eastern Intercollegiate Tennis Association champions, but not Ivy champions. So yes, we had a very positive year, David, but I think more in tune with having a peak year, and I want to get back to winning 8 and 9 Ivy titles.
So you mentioned looking towards the future with all the things that have gone on this year that may help you and your department down the road. Where do you see the department in the next 5 or 10 years?
I believe that the best is yet to come. I really do, because we had, over the previous 5 or 6 years, not given our coaches the same scenario in financial aid. And now that we are equal in that regard, I believe the best coaching staff in the Ivy League is at Cornell. And given that truth in my mind, we're about to take off to another level. I really believe we can return to winning those kind of titles that we did in 2005-06, and to actually progress even deeper into the national tournament in a lot of sports. So I believe that one factor, and I believe it's the most important thing that's happened in athletics at Cornell, and this may sound like an exaggeration, but I believe in the last 10, 15, maybe 20 years, it's the most important thing that's happened to us. And I'm very excited about the future. And it was reflected already in our first football recruiting class that was just off the charts. So exciting times in the next 5 to 10 years.
And you mentioned some of the coaching staff that you've had to rehire here in the last few years in some particularly prominent sports and many sports across your department. What has that process been like, and how difficult is it to replace so many coaches sort of year after year?
Well, actually, it's interesting. That particular year that you refer to was sort of the confluence of a number of things happening at once. I don't think in my time here there's ever been a time that we've hired more than 2 or 3 coaches in a given year, but that was 5 coaches, including football. That's a prominent sport, certainly, and then our Sweet 16 basketball run with Steve Donahue, and then Jeff Tambroni, leaving for Penn State, and then the 2 tennis programs. So that was an anomalous year. but as far as the difficulty, I would tell you that promoting Ben DeLuca was not a difficult decision. And actually the basketball search, while incredibly important, wasn't that difficult, because the Sweet 16 run, having just won 3 consecutive Ivy titles, really allowed us to instantaneously have a large cohort of terrific coaches who wanted the job, from the Big Ten to the ACC across the board. So that wasn't as tough. The football position was very difficult, because we just really believed in our hearts that we had to knock it out of the park, because to hire just a very good coach would have put us in the mix of the other very good coaches in the Ivy League. And we felt to sort of make the jump from the bottom echelon of the league, where we had been for a few years, to the middle and then the top in short order, we had to have a coach that was just very, very different. And we were extremely fortunate to hire Kent Austin and to have him accept our offer. A gentleman who'd been the coach of the year in the professional ranks in Canada, who'd been the player of the year in the professional ranks in Canada, quarterback, who took Ole Miss to 2 Cotton Bowl championships consecutively, who beaten the likes of LSU and Tennessee and Florida, et cetera, et cetera. That's a different guy. And we've certainly seen that in his first year here, in his recruiting, and also in the processes that he's put in place. Very bright coach, but also a terrific people person, really relates to the student athletes. Just a phenomenal, lucky hire in many ways. So that one was probably the most difficult. And then the tennis jobs were a bit difficult too, but we did very, very well landing Tony Bresky, who wins an Ivy title in his first year, and of course Mike Stevens from Binghamton University, who'd been interested in the job prior and finally landed it, and he's done an amazing job in year one. So an interesting time, David. It's I'm glad that one's behind us.
So you mentioned some of the excitement moving forward. Tell us about some of the things that are going on here this summer, some of the big projects that are wrapping up and for the future.
Well, one of the biggest projects is that we are about to have a new video scoreboard, thanks to the generosity of many alumni across a number of sports, primarily football, but across a number of sports. We will actually have a terrific video board where we can have highlights, where we can introduce our players, whether it be varsity football players, sprint football players, men and women's lacrosse players. It'll be terrific for graduation, so David Scorton can be up there on the screen so that everybody in the Crescent can actually see him up close and personal. But that's going to be a terrific project that will start pretty soon. It's an inexpensive, but again funded by alumni, a first-class board that will really be appropriate for the icon that the Crescent is and the icon that Sholkoff Field is. And we're very excited about that, and it is scheduled to be ready in early August so that we have time to learn how to appropriately work with it before the start of the football season. So that's a big project. There's another project that sort of occurred on the heels of the Daktronics scoreboard for football, and that is a scoreboard for track, indoor track in Barton Hall. We had a very generous family, parent of an athlete, step up and state, I want to do something of impact for this terrific program that's won many championships over the last 8-9 years, and it's something that we sorely need that exists at a lot of the other Ivy schools, and so we're ready to put out to bid a contract for an indoor scoreboard for varsity indoor men and women's track that will be supported really by one very generous family.
Wow. Tell me, what are some of the top challenges that you see facing you and your program this year and beyond?
The greatest challenge really is in these difficult economic times, they really are financial challenges. We have terrific personnel in our department right now. We have just phenomenal head coaches who've surrounded themselves with outstanding assistant coaches. But it's really a funding issue. We are raising approximately $3.5 million a year in annual gifts. Last year we raised $3.8. We actually exceeded our number by $500,000 last year, thanks to the generosity of these amazing alumni. We have the financial aid initiative where we need to invite former athletes and alumni across the board to contribute to our matching program and financial aid. And we also have 11 self-funded programs that need to increase their annual support so that they can be truly self-funded. That was a mandate by the university that allowed us to continue with all 36 programs without having to eliminate any, while many programs at Cornell have been reduced or eliminated across the board, many academic areas as well. So we feel fortunate to have the option to do that significant fundraising for 11 of our 36 teams so that we didn't have to eliminate opportunity and experience for undergraduate students at Cornell. So I think the blunt answer is it's a financial challenge. That's number 1, 2, and 3 on the challenge hit parade.
Well, thanks for joining me. We really appreciate it and looking forward to continued success in the Ivy League and beyond.
Well, thanks so much. Thanks for having me, Dave.
Thanks so much for watching Sidelines. Tune in next time. Let's go Red.